The old woman stood at the riverbank, struggling with a clay pot filled to the brim with water, but she didn't ask for help, even though her legs looked too weak to be struggling with that kind of load. The young woman, Obi, looked at the hill. It was steep. The sun was setting. She was already late. But something in the old woman's eyes made her stop. "Mama, let me help you." She lifted the pot onto her head and immediately knew something was wrong. But how did a simple act of kindness turn into a test that would change everything? Let's go back to the beginning, because this story about a girl who refused to complain, an old woman who was more than she seemed, and a wish that revealed the deepest truth of a human heart started on an ordinary evening when nothing felt ordinary at all. Once upon a time, in a village where the river ran clear and the forest grew thick with secrets, there lived a young woman named Obiageli. Everyone called her Obi. She was 27 years old, unmarried, and running out of time by the village's standards. Her mother had died giving birth to her youngest brother when Obi was 19. Her father followed 3 years later, his heart broken and his body worn from grief. That left Obi to raise 3 younger siblings alone. Her sister Adana was now 15, old enough to help in the house. Her brothers Chidi and Emeka were 12 and 9, full of energy and endless hunger. Obi worked as a seamstress. She woke before dawn to fetch water, cooked breakfast, walked to Mama Ngozi's shop in the market where she sewed clothes for other women's weddings, other women's children, other women's celebrations. She worked until her fingers ached and her eyes burned from squinting at tiny stitches. Then she walked home, cooked dinner, helped with homework, mended clothes by lamplight, and collapsed into sleep, only to do it all again. The other women her age were married now. They had husbands to provide, mothers-in-law to help with children, compounds to call home. Obi had suitors once, but when her parents died and she refused to abandon her siblings, the suitors disappeared. Who wants a wife with 3 mouths to feed already? Her aunt had said, not unkindly, just stating facts. Obi didn't complain. Complaining changed nothing. She simply worked harder. If you've ever felt like you're carrying the world alone, hit the like button. This story is for you. That evening, Obi left the market later than usual. Mama Ngozi had needed an urgent repair on a customer's wedding dress, and Obi couldn't say no. The extra money would buy rice for the week. By the time she finished, the sun was already sinking toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and deep purple. Obi hurried along the path home, her small bag of sewing supplies clutched to her chest. She needed to get back before dark. Adana would be watching the boys, but she was still young herself. They needed Obi. The path home crossed the river at a shallow ford. Most people used the wooden bridge upstream, but Obi took the ford because it cut 15 minutes of her journey. 15 minutes meant everything when you had dinner to cook and children to feed. As she approached the river, she saw an old woman standing at the water's edge. The woman was bent with age, her wrapper faded and worn, her headscarf tied loosely around grey hair. She struggled with a large clay pot, trying to lift it onto her head. "Please," the old woman called out, her voice thin and strained. "Please, my daughter, can you help an old woman?" Obi stopped. She should keep walking. She was already late. Adana would be worried. But something in the old woman's eyes made her feet refuse to move forward. Not desperation, not manipulation, just quiet, patient waiting. As if she knew Obi would help, as if she'd been waiting specifically for Obi. "Of course, Mama," Obi said, walking toward her. "Where are you taking the water?" The old woman smiled. Her teeth were remarkably white for her age. "Just to the top of that hill, up there." She pointed with a gnarled finger toward a steep slope on the other side of the river. "My house is there, not far." Obi looked at the hill. It was steep and rocky. In the fading light, it looked even more treacherous. "Mama, that hill is dangerous in the dark. Can't it wait until morning?" My grandchildren are thirsty, the old woman said simply. They've been waiting all day. Obi's heart softened. She thought of Chidi and Emeka at home, probably thirsty themselves. All right, Mama, let me help you. She set down her bag and bent to lift the clay pot. The moment her hand touched it, she knew. This was not normal water. The pot looked like it held maybe 3 gallons. That should weigh about 25 pounds. Heavy, but manageable. This pot felt like it held stones, bricks, the weight of the earth itself. Obi's arms trembled as she lifted it. Her legs nearly buckled. The pot was so heavy it made her entire body shake. But the old woman was watching her with those strange, bright eyes, and Obi had already said yes. She gritted her teeth, adjusted her wrapper, and with a tremendous effort, hoisted the pot onto her head. Pain shot through her neck immediately. The weight pressed down on her skull like a mountain. Her spine felt like it would compress into nothing. Lead the way, Mama, Obi managed, her voice steady despite the agony. The old woman smiled again and began walking toward the river. They crossed the shallow water, the old woman moving surprisingly quickly for someone so bent and aged. Obi followed, each step an act of will. The pot wobbled dangerously on her head. One wrong move and it would crash to the ground. They reached the base of the hill. Obi looked up. It seemed taller now, steeper. The path was narrow and rocky. Are you sure this is the way, Mama? The only way. Come, we must hurry before full darkness. They began to climb. Every step was torture. The rocks shifted under Obi's feet. Thorns caught at her wrapper. The pot felt heavier with each passing moment, as if the water inside was multiplying, growing denser. Obi's neck screamed. Her shoulders burned. Sweat poured down her face despite the cooling evening air. Behind her eyes, a headache pounded like drums. But she didn't complain. She didn't ask the old woman to slow down. She didn't suggest they rest. She had given her word she would see it through. Halfway up the hill, Obi's foot slipped on loose gravel. She stumbled, nearly falling. The pot lurched dangerously. The old woman turned quickly. Are you all right, my daughter? Yes, Mama, Obi lied, her legs shaking. Just a loose stone. I'm fine. They continued. The old woman began to hum, a strange tune, old and haunting. It seemed to echo off the trees, to vibrate in the air itself. Obi focused on the sound, used it to distract herself from the pain. One foot in front of the other. Don't think about the weight. Don't think about the distance. Just keep moving. Comment below if you've ever pushed through when everything in you wanted to quit. Where are you watching from? Finally, after what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, they reached the top of the hill. Obi's entire body trembled, her vision blurred at the edges, her neck felt permanently bent, her spine compressed. She looked around for the old woman's house. There was nothing, just trees and rocks and the darkening sky. Mama, Obi said carefully, trying not to let confusion or frustration enter her voice. Where is your house? The old woman turned to face her fully. In the fading light, something shifted in her appearance. She seemed taller somehow. Her bent back straightened slightly. Her eyes gleamed with an unnatural brightness. There is no house, the old woman said quietly. Obi's heart pounded. Fear crept up her spine, colder than the evening air. Then, where should I put the water? The old woman pointed back down the hill toward the river. Pour it back where it came from. Time seemed to stop. Obi stared at the old woman. She had carried this impossible weight up a steep hill in the near darkness, her body screaming with every step. And now she was being told to pour it out, to waste it, to make the entire journey meaningless. Rage flickered in Obi's chest, hot and sharp. She had been late getting home. Adana was probably terrified. The boys were probably hungry. She had risked her safety on this dark hill for nothing, for a cruel joke. The old woman watched her, those bright eyes unblinking. This was a test. Obi knew it suddenly, deeply. This whole thing was a test. And she had a choice. She could scream, curse, throw the pot down in anger, demand an explanation, call the old woman mad or cruel or a liar, Or she could do what she'd done all her life, accept what couldn't be changed, finish what she'd started, and refuse to complain. Obi took a deep breath. "Yes, Mama," she said quietly. "I'll pour it back." She walked carefully back down the hill, the old woman following in silence. The descent was almost harder than the climb. The weight pulled her forward, threatening to send her tumbling. Her legs shook so badly she had to stop several times to steady herself. But she didn't complain, not once. When they reached the river bank, Obi carefully lowered the pot from her head. Her neck cracked audibly. Pain radiated down her spine. She lifted the heavy pot and tilted it toward the water. The liquid that poured out was not ordinary water. It glowed faintly in the twilight, silvery and strange, and when it hit the river, it seemed to disappear into light rather than splash. Obi set down the empty pot. Obi set the empty pot down and turned to face the old woman. The old woman was no longer bent. She stood straight and tall. Her faded wrapper had transformed into cloth that shimmered like moonlight. Her grey hair was now black and lustrous. She was beautiful, ageless, not human. Obi's breath caught, but she didn't run. She simply waited. "Do you know who I am?" the woman asked, her voice now rich and layered, like many voices speaking as one. "A spirit," Obi whispered, "from the river." "Mowo Miri," the spirit confirmed. "Water spirit, guardian of this river and the forest beyond." She stepped closer to Obi. "For 3 full moons, I have tested the young women of this village. I appear as an old woman in need. I ask for help. I make the load impossible. I make the journey cruel. And at the end, I make it meaningless." Her eyes, dark and fathomless as deep water, studied Obi's face. Most refuse to help at all. They see an old woman and turn away. Too busy, too important, not their problem. Some help, the spirit continued, but they complain. They sigh and groan. They hurry me along, anxious to be done with the burden of kindness. They make sure I know what a sacrifice they are making. And when I tell them to pour the water back, they explode. They rage and curse. They call me names. They storm away feeling cheated, feeling wronged. The spirit smiled. "You are the first to carry the load without complaint, to endure the meaningless task without anger, to accept the absurdity without bitterness." She placed a hand on Obi's shoulder. The touch was cool, like river water on a hot day. "This is the rarest kindness, not kindness that expects gratitude, not kindness that demands meaning, but kindness that endures even when it seems wasted." Tears suddenly burned in Obi's eyes. Years of exhaustion, of thankless work, of carrying burdens no one saw or acknowledged, rose up in her throat. "I don't know how to do anything else," Obi whispered. "I know," the spirit said gently. "That is why you are worthy." Smash that subscribe button if this story is hitting different. We're just getting to the miracle. The spirit stepped back and raised her hands. The river behind her began to glow with the same silver light as the water Obi had poured out. "For your kindness, for your endurance, for your refusal to become bitter despite your burdens, I offer you a gift." The air shimmered. "I will grant you one wish, anything your heart truly desires. Wealth, marriage, beauty, power, freedom from your responsibilities." She paused, her eyes penetrating. "But choose carefully. I will grant what you truly want, not what you think you should want. The heart does not lie to spirits." Obi's mind raced. One wish, anything. She could wish for money, enough to never worry again, to send her siblings to the best schools, to stop sewing until her fingers bled. She could wish for a husband, a good man who would help carry the burden, who would love her and her siblings, who would give her the life she'd sacrificed. She could wish to be free, to have her siblings grown and independent, to travel, to live for herself finally. She could wish her parents back, to undo the death, the grief, the years of struggle. What did she truly want? Obi closed her eyes. She thought of Adana at home, probably worried sick. She thought of Chidi and Emeka, probably hungry, probably wondering where she was. She thought of how tired she was, how alone, how endless the road ahead seemed. And she realized something that made her heart crack open. She didn't want to escape them. She wanted them to have better. She wanted them to have chances she'd never had. She wanted them to dream bigger than survival. But more than that, she wanted to never become bitter about it. She wanted to keep loving them without resentment. She wanted to carry the load without complaint, truly without complaint, not outwardly but in her heart. She opened her eyes. "I wish," Obi said slowly, "for my heart to remain soft despite hardship, for my siblings to grow strong and kind and successful, and for us to always have enough, never too much to make us forget our struggles, but always enough to meet our needs." The spirit tilted her head, surprised. "You don't wish for yourself?" "They are myself," Obi said simply. "Their joy is mine, their success is mine, and a soft heart is the greatest gift I could ask for. Bitterness would destroy me more than poverty ever could." Silence fell. Then the spirit smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "3 times wise," she said softly. "You understand what most never learn, that the true burden is not the load itself, but the bitterness we carry about having to bear it." She clapped her hands once. The sound echoed like thunder, like 1,000 drums, like the world shifting on its axis. "It is done." Light exploded from the river, silver and gold and blinding. Obi threw up her arms to shield her eyes. When the light faded, the spirit was gone. But lying on the ground where she had stood was a small leather pouch. Obi picked it up carefully. Inside were seeds, just ordinary-looking seeds, maybe 20 of them. And a voice whispered in her mind, clear as if the spirit stood beside her. "Plant these in your compound. Water them with river water. They will grow quickly and bear fruit like no tree in this land. Sell the fruit, but always give some away freely to those who can't pay, to the sick, to the struggling. This is your livelihood now, not sowing for others' joy, but harvesting from your own hands. Your siblings will thrive. Adana will become a teacher, Chidi a doctor, Emeka a builder who will build wells and schools. They will remember who raised them, and they will honor you. And your heart will remain soft, because that was your truest wish. Hardship will come, but it will not harden you. Love will come, but it will not distract you. And you will teach others by your example what true strength looks like." Obi clutched the pouch to her chest, tears streaming freely now. She looked down at the river. The water was ordinary again, dark and peaceful in the night. "Thank you," she whispered. The river seemed to whisper back. "Thank you, daughter, for seeing me, for testing me, for teaching me that the burden itself is not the enemy. Bitterness is." Obi ran home. When she burst through the door, Adana leapt up from where she'd been sitting with the boys, her face tight with worry. "Obi, we were so scared. Where were you?" Obi hugged her sister tightly, then her brothers, breathing in their familiar smell. I'm sorry I'm late, but something incredible happened." She told them everything about the old woman, the impossible wait, the climb, the meaningless task, the spirit's true form, and the wish. Adana's eyes grew wide. Chidi and Emeka bounced with excitement. "Can we see the seeds?" Emeka demanded. Obi showed them. They looked so ordinary, but when she placed them on the table, they seemed to glow faintly in the lamplight. The next morning, Obi planted them in the compound, in the bare patch where her mother used to grow vegetables before she died. She fetched water from the river and poured it carefully around each seed. By evening, tiny shoots had emerged. By the next morning, they were saplings as tall as Obi's knee. 3 days later, they were trees, their branches heavy with fruit unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Golden-skinned, sweet-smelling, radiating vitality. The village came to stare. Mama Nogozi brought the elders. They examined the trees, tasted the fruit, and declared it a miracle. "This fruit heals sickness," one elder said, her arthritic hands suddenly steady after eating. "This fruit satisfies hunger like nothing else," another said. "One fruit feeds a whole family." "This fruit brings strength," a young man said. His chronic fatigue vanished. Word spread beyond the village. People came from other towns, other regions to buy the miracle fruit. Obi sold it, but she remembered the spirit's instruction. She always gave some away freely to those who couldn't pay, to the sick, to the struggling. Money flowed in, not a fortune, but enough, always enough. Adana went to secondary school, then university. She became a teacher beloved by her students. Chidi studied medicine. He returned to set up a clinic in their village, treating the poor for free or for trade. Emeka learned construction and engineering. He built wells in neighboring villages and designed schools that let in light and air. And Obi? She tended her trees. She helped her siblings. She never married, but suitors eventually stopped pitying her for it because it was clear she had chosen her path. She was loved. She was respected. She was free. But more importantly, she was soft. Her heart never hardened. When new struggles came, and they did, she carried them without bitterness. When others needed help, she helped without counting the cost. She became known throughout the region as the woman with the generous heart, the one who had carried water for a spirit and been rewarded not with escape, but with grace. Drop a like if you believe true wealth is a soft heart in a hard world. Years later, when Adana was preparing to marry and Obi was helping her dress, the younger woman asked, "Obi, do you ever regret not wishing for yourself, for your own marriage, your own freedom?" Obi smiled, tying the coral beads around her sister's neck. "I wished for what I truly wanted. A soft heart, your success, enough, and I got all three." She looked at Adana's face in the mirror. "This is my freedom, Adana. Watching you become this amazing woman, seeing Chidi save lives, watching Emeka build things that last. This is my marriage, my family, my legacy. Not children from my body, but futures I helped build." Adana hugged her tightly. "You carried us," she whispered, "just like you carried that impossible water." "And I would carry you again," Obi said, 1,000 times without complaint. That night, Obi walked alone to the river. She did this sometimes, hoping to see the spirit again, to say thank you again. She never saw her, but sometimes the water would glow faintly silver in the moonlight, and Obi would know she was heard. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness, "for seeing me, for testing me, for teaching me that the burden itself is not the enemy. Bitterness is." The river whispered back in a voice like water over stones. "You taught yourself, daughter. I only gave you the chance to prove what you already were. The gift was never the seeds. The gift was showing you that your heart was already gold." Obi smiled and walked home to her family, her trees, her life built on the simple foundation of carrying burdens without bitterness. And somewhere in the river, a spirit smiled and continued her eternal watch, still testing, still waiting, still searching for hearts that could carry impossible weights and pour out meaningless water without rage. Because those hearts, rare as moonlight on still water, were the ones that changed worlds. If this story reminded you what real strength looks like, share it with someone who's carrying a heavy load. Tell us in the comments, what's one burden you've carried without bitterness? And before you go, subscribe so you never miss stories that remind us that character is tested not in the easy moments, but in the pointless ones, the painful ones, the ones that seem to have no reward. Until next time, keep your heart soft and your strength quiet. Your endurance is noticed by forces you cannot see.